Today we're going to start exploring polynomials that are actually written in factored form. So we need to look and see what it means to be in factored form. And all that means is a polynomial, so something with multiple terms that are written as a product of factors. So you can see the standard form of a polynomial is just terms added or subtracted together. But when we put it into the factored form, we've now made it a product of two polynomials, or a product of the factors. And then we're going to start using a word that we've never really used before called roots. And all roots are is a solution to a polynomial equation. So the roots are our solutions. So let's go down and see what that actually means and how we're going to work with it. So all we do if we want to get a solution is first we make sure it is in factored form. Factored form has to be set equal to 0, and it has to be two factors multiplied or three factors multiplied together. So these are in factored form. To get our solution, we're going to take the first factor, x, and we're going to set it equal to 0. Then we're going to take the second factor, x plus 5, and set it equal to 0. So now we've really created two separate equations because we're going to have two separate solutions, one for each factor. So my first factor, I've already got the solution, x equals 0. But on this other one, I don't have 0 by itself, or I don't have x by itself yet. So in order to get the solution, I have to get x by itself. So if I want to get this guy all by itself, I have to do the opposite of, or zero out, the other term. So the other term over here on this side of the line is that positive 5. So in order to zero out a positive 5, I'm going to do minus 5. And remember, whatever I do on one side, I have to do to the other. So my 5's cancel out, and I'm left with x equals negative 5. So the solution to number 1 is x equals 0 and x equals negative 5. Those are my two solutions. Okay, let's do another one. Let's have you do number 2. So pause the video, and I want you to set number 2, each of the factors equal to 0, and see if you can get the correct answer. Then start the video back up. Okay, make sure you got c equals 2 and c equals negative 1 for number 2. Now number 3 takes it just a little further. Our factors are a little bit more involved than they were in number 1 and 2. So let's go ahead and do number 3. We have 2b minus 6 equals 0. That's my first factor. And my other one's 3b plus 18 equals 0. So I've set them both to 0. Now I'm going to solve them both. So I'm solving for b. I'm going to go ahead and circle my b term. That's what I'm solving for. So my goal is to get this b term by itself on the left side of the line. So I need to zero out this negative 6 that's with it. So I'll zero out a negative 6. I'm going to put a positive 6 on both sides of the line. And that gives me 2b equals 6. Okay, well, I'm still solving for b, but I don't have b by itself. So that was my move, move, move. Now I'm dividing. And I've got b equals 3. Okay, now let's work on my second factor. Okay, again, my goal is to solve for b. So I got to get b by itself. So if I cover up the 3b I've circled, I know the first thing I've got to do is move that 18. So I'm going to say minus 18, zero it out. And now I've got 3b equals negative 18. So that was my moving. Now I've got to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by the coefficient of 3. The 3's cross out. Oops. The 3's cross out, and that leaves me with b equals -6. So my answer to this is b equals 3 and b equals -6. Okay. So now I want everyone to do number 4 on your own. Pause the video, come back and check your answers. Okay, so my answers are g equals 0, g equals 2, and g equals -2. The only thing on that one was to notice we actually had 3 factors instead of just 2. Okay, and then on number 5, before we can even set our factors equal to 0, we're going to have to actually take care of that squared. So all that's telling us is that we really have x minus 3 times x minus 3. And if we set them equal to 0, we're going to have x minus 3 equals 0, actually written twice. So since they're exact same equation, I'm only going to have to solve it once. If I add 3 on both sides, I know that my answer to this is x equals 3. And that's my answer. Okay, so now that you know how to solve quadratics that are in factored form, let's talk about finding the greatest common factor so that we can begin to factor some of these equations. Okay, so when we're talking about the greatest common factor, we're just talking about what do the terms have in common. So when we look at 3x and we look at 24x squared, first thing I'm going to do is just kind of expand it out. So I've got 3x and I've got 24x squared. Now let's see what they have in common. We're going to start with numbers. And on both of these, if I start with my numbers, my coefficients, there's a 3 in both of them. So 3 is common in both of them. Now I'm going to look at my variables. I have 1x over here. I have 1x over here. I have 1x that's in common in both of them. So I've got 3x is my greatest common factor. That's the most that both of them have in common. All right, let's look at the next one, number 7. Again, I'm going to go ahead and expand it out so I can see how many x's I actually have in common in each one. So I've got 12 x to the third, and I've also got 18 x squared. So again, I'm going to start with my coefficient. Okay, I don't have a 12 in common with both of them, so let's go down to a 6. I have a 6 that I have in common with both of them. I can take out of both of them. So I'm going to take out a 6. That's the greatest common number. Now in this first one, I have 3 x's. The second one, I only have 2. So the most that they both have in common are these 2 x's. So x, I can write them out expanded, but my actual answer will be 6x squared. I'll have to go ahead and combine them back. Okay, so let's look at one that's a little bit more expandable. And I'm going to expand it out first. So I've got 5x to the third, y to the second, and I've got 20 x to the second, y to the third, and a z. Okay, so we're going to again start with our numbers, 5 and 20, and see what's in common in both of them. Well, as a hint, I always start with whichever number is smaller and see if that goes into both of them. And in this case, the 5, which is smaller, does divide evenly into 20. So 5 is my coefficient. Now, in this term, I have 3 x's, but I only have 2 over here. So only 2 of the x's are in common. So I'm going to go ahead and write x squared. And then looking at my y's, I have 2 in the first term, 3 in the second, so only 2 are in common. So y squared. And then if I look, I also have a z, but I only have it in one, so it's not common in both. So my greatest common factor, the thing that's common in both terms, is 5x squared yz. Okay, so let's turn the page. So we're going to use what we just learned about greatest common factor to actually factor a polynomial. Let me go ahead and make this bigger so we can look at it. All right, so we're going to factor this polynomial. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and expand it out so I can see what I've got. So I've got 6x squared, and I've got 3x. Okay, so we're going to write our greatest common factor. We're going to write it here on this line, and then we're going to put everything else remaining in our parentheses. So let's see how that works. I look first at my coefficient. I have a 6 and a 3. So I'm going to start with my smallest number. 3 is in common with both of them. So I'm going to pull out a 3. That's my first of my common factor. Now I'm going to look at my variables. I have 2 over here, but I only have 1 here. So only 1 is in common with both of them. So I'm going to pull out an x. Okay, so now to figure out what goes in my parentheses, what's remaining, I'm actually dividing out this 3x from both of them. So I've taken my greatest common factor and I'm actually dividing it into both of my terms. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. I can cancel out one of my x's, leaving me with 2x in the first term. Plus 3 divided by 3 is 1. X divided by x is 1, so I'm just left with 1. So factoring that, I removed my greatest common factor, put that on the outside, and then divided it out and left everybody else on the inside. Let's just see if I did it right. If I multiplied my 3x times my 2x, I would have 6x squared. So I would have a little 6x squared here. And if I multiplied my 3x times my 1, I would have plus 3x. So I did do it correct because it ties back in. So factoring is just pulling out the greatest common factor and putting in parentheses whatever's left. All right, so let's look at number 10. And let's let you try and work number 10. No, I'll do number 10 with you. You can do number 11 on your own. So number 10, we've got, first thing we're going to do is expand out what we've got. So we've got 4y to the 4th minus 20y to the 3rd. And we're going to need to put our greatest common factor on the outside and then divide out, and what's left will be on the inside. So let's start with our numbers. We have a 4 and a 20. The 4 is the smallest of the numbers. It divides into 20, so we know that 4 is in common with both of them, so we pull it out. And then when we look at our variables, we have 3 y's on one side and we have 4 y's on the other. So only 3 is in common with both of them. So we're going to pull out 3 y's, or y to the 3rd. And now let's divide that out. So we're going to divide each of our terms by our greatest common factor and see what's left. So when I divide, I'm going to go ahead and keep it expanded. So 4y to the 3rd power being divided out of both sides. Okay, so my 4's cancel out, that's a 1. My y cancels out. That leaves me with 1y, so y. Then I've got negative 20 divided by 4. Negative 20 divided by 4 is negative 5. And then I've got y, y, y. Those all cancel out. So my answer is 4, y to the third. That was my greatest common factor. That's now on the outside of my parenthesis. And what was remaining, y minus 5, was on the inside. Okay, so number 11, pause the video. I want you to do number 11 on your own and then check back on your answer. Okay, verify that you got the right answer. Now we're going to put the two concepts that we've learned together today, or that we've learned today. We're going to put those two concepts together. So, first it says to solve the equation, and what that really is meaning is finding the roots. Before we can find the roots, we have to get it from standard form, which it's in right now. It's a standard form. There's no multiplied factors. And we have to get it factored so that we get it into factored form so we can solve it. So to do that, we're going to use the skill we just learned of finding the greatest common factor. So let's go ahead and expand this out. We have 35n minus 49n squared. Okay, I'm going to start first with my numbers. I got 35 and 49. Now, the biggest number I can think of that is common in both of them would be 7. So I'm going to pull out a 7. And then I'm going to look at my n's. I got 1 n in the first term. I got 2 n's in the second, so I can pull out 1 n. So now I'll put my parentheses, and I'm going to go up and I'm going to divide out my 7n on both sides. So 7n and 7n. Okay, so 35 divided by 7 is 5. My n's cancel out. I got minus 49 divided by 7 is 7. One of my n's cancels out, and it leaves me with an n. Okay, so now I have my polynomial put into factored form. Now I'm going to put each of my factors equal to 0. So I'll have 7n equals 0, and I'll have 5 minus 7n equals 0. And now what I'm going to do is just solve both of those. Let's move it up, get us some room. All right, so 7n equals 0. Draw my line down the middle. I'm going to divide both sides by 7. And I've got n equals 0. That one was easy. Now on the other one, I know I'm solving for n, so I'm going to go ahead and circle my n term. That means the n term is what stays over here, so I need to zero out this 5. So I'm going to say minus 5 on both sides. That leaves me with negative 7n equals negative 5. Still solving for n, so I'm going to divide both sides by the coefficient, which is negative 7. So I got n equals positive 5/7. So my answers to this are n equals 0 and n equals 5/7. Okay. I'm going to let you do number 13 and then check back and make sure you got the answer right. Okay, check your answers. And let's look at number 14, because number 14 is not in factored form. It's not in standard form. It's not in factored form. Why isn't it in standard form? What's wrong with it? Well, what's wrong with it is it's not equal to 0. To be in standard form, it has to be equal to 0. So first thing we got to do is get this thing equal to 0. So we're going to just say, let's zero out our 72x and add it to the other side. Okay, so what we really got here is 6x squared plus 72x equals 0. Now that we have it in factored form, we can go ahead and solve it. Same for number 15. before you can solve it, you got to get it into factored form. So pause the video, go ahead and finish these last two, turn on the video and verify you've got the right answers. All right, check your answers. If you have any other questions, come into tutoring and I'll help you out.